Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted. And here we have Chiss-Goria Forged Tyrant, a artifact, an affinity for artifact deck in mono red. This deck comes to us from Virtual Work 4367, who says, "This is my Chiss-Goria deck. It's meant to be a bit budget, so that's why I don't have some staples like Darkside Extortionist. I wonder how much Darkside is these days. Darkside Extortionist is still at least $50 American, which is quite a bit if you ask me. I don't think you're a budget deck if you're not including $50 cards. I think that's just a regular deck. I think it's very reasonable not to force Darkside into every deck, even if it is on theme with artifacts. So we're going to take a look at this deck, and as always, the deck list is in the video description below. I highly recommend you take a look. Chiss-Goria is a very, very fun commander, and I really like this build of it, and I think you get some really good ideas if you want to build something similar if you take a look before I go through it myself. So who is Chiss-Goria, and why are we using them as our commander? Well, Chiss-Goria is a 9 mana legendary dragon, 5/4 flying haste with affinity for artifacts. When Chiss-Goria attacks, you reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may cast an artifact from those 5, and if you do, it'll gain affinity for artifacts until end of turn. I guess I put that backwards. You can cast them this turn, and if you do, it has affinity for artifacts. So just as a reminder, affinity of artifacts means that the mana cost, the colorless mana cost, will go down. I guess the generic mana cost, I should say, will go down for each artifact you have in play. And I'm more than fairly certain that Chiss-Goria will allow that to counteract commander tax, keeping Chiss-Goria at 3 red mana. And I would say at 3 red mana, whew, what a deal Chiss-Goria is. Despite having an attack trigger, I really do like that he comes in with haste, so we're already in business once it comes out. This is a very, very fun dragon. Before we go any further, let's take a look at the mana curve. So interestingly enough, this is kind of a ramp deck. And when we think of the fact that we are trying to give cards, our artifacts mainly, affinity for artifacts to allow them to come out faster, I think this curve generally makes sense. What I do find interesting is how high the 3 mana slot is, when 3 mana is almost primarily the mana cost of Chiss-Goria. So we might, have a few opinions on that mana slot. But the rest of it kind of goes on further and further. And I think reasonably we might want to kind of pick a number sometimes. I know it's kind of difficult because we only have so many artifacts that we work with. We want non-red artifacts so we don't have to tap any red to make it work. But we should probably pick a number and aim towards it as the regular kind of affinity that we want. I think a safe number for that is 6, right? Because 6 is the number we need for Chiss-Goria, and therefore, if we are aiming to have 6 mana generally, we should be keeping that in mind for every other card. I think don't understand that as me telling you can't play any of these that are higher than 6 mana, but perhaps it's something to consider because it means that when you use Chiss-Goria, you have to make sure you have extra mana available, or you have a treasure token or two to make up for the fact that most likely you will be at affinity 6. Or perhaps this deck is much better at getting affinity than I think it does, and if you can slap down Chiss-Goria with affinity being 7 or 8, excuse me, more than I think that's fantastic, right? All right, so let's take a look at cards, and let's take a look at especially some of our higher cards that aren't artifacts. Things like Metalwork Colossus or Bosch Iron Golem, I don't want to be too picky on them, especially things like Platinum Angel. I know why we're playing these cards. This is the bread and butter of the deck. this is the kind of card we want to slam down basically for free by using Chiss-Goria. So I'm not going to put too much scrutiny on these cards. What I'm going to do is put some scrutiny on the cards that lead up to it that we cannot use Chiss-Goria to cast. So nice and easy, we can start off by looking at There and Back Again. There and Back Again is really strange here. I do respect the fact that in a very roundabout way, it creates a ton of treasure tokens. It creates 14 treasure tokens should Smog die. But that's a lot of hoops to jump through. So let's think about it this way. You play There and Back Again. So you pick a creature, it can't block for 3 turn cycles. This is pretty relevant. I will say this is worth a lot more than it appears to be, because you can pick a very relevant lifelinker or a very strong blocker and basically take it out of the game for several attacks. You can shut down a blocker for Chiss-Goria. I think this part of it is pretty strong, and I do really like it. So off to a pretty good start. The second ability is to put a mountain into play. Not really why you're playing this. I guess it's fine. At least it doesn't come in tapped, but all in all, it's not a particularly strong card. And then finally, after all of that, we get Smog, who is 6/6 flying haste. 6/6 isn't that good of a stat line for Commander. It's just a little more than 10% of your opponent's health. I think it's like 15% in my mind. That makes sense. And I think that's just fine. It's like the difference between attacking with a 2/2 or a 3/3 in one-on-one. So the body isn't particularly good. And then you need Smog to die. This is very specific. It's not leave the battlefield. So if your opponents are really worried about you getting 14 treasure tokens, which frankly they should be, they have a really easy answer. They can just Swords to Plowshares. They just can just bounce the token. There's just too many weak points that this card has for such a high mana cost that I don't particularly like it here. I'd like it to go out. The Brothers War, I think, is, let's see, I think this is fine. I've never quite seen this. I saw the 2-tap Power Stone tokens, and I already thought, you know what, that's good enough. So you've already got me here. Shiny Impetus is fine as well. I do wish it was a little better of a card. Curse of Opulence is already here for that, so I think that's fine. It's just going to take a very long time for this card to do something really meaningful, so I'm not going to be too picky here, but it could be better. Artifacts we're going to skip because they're all castable off of Chiss-Goria, but I will have something to say about the artifacts when we get to it, because I do feel like there should be more. It does, like, I know this, the way the deck lists work is all of the creatures that are artifacts are here, and whereas all the artifacts are just artifacts are here. So if we did that addition subtraction, I'm sure there would be much more artifacts, but I still feel like we're playing a little less than I would like, and I will get into that with my additions. All of our instants are great. I have like one addition to put in there, but I think they're fantastic. Sorceries. So Brass's Bounty is the one that really sticks out to me, because don't get me wrong, it's really, really good, but it's gonna be just okay sometimes. 7 mana is a lot. This is basically a dead card in our hand most of the time, and I think once we have, like, we imagine it in situations where we have 7 mana, right? And those situations are very, very good. But even if we have 7 mana, it doesn't necessarily mean we have 7 lands. Considering treasure tokens, considering mana rocks being especially good in this deck, it's possible we cast this with 4 lands. And are you really going to pay 7 mana for 4 treasure tokens? I wouldn't. I don't really think you should either. So this kind of sticks out to me as a particularly weaker card. So I don't really like it here. Imposing Grandeur represents the ability to draw 9 cards. Okay, I do see it. I forgot that Chiss-Goria. Yeah, this kind of card is really, really good here, so I do really like that. See Visions of Ruins. That's fine, like that. Pirate's Pillage. The rest are particularly good. Perfect. Creatures, the same thing. I'm going to skip all of our artifacts, and I'm going to Hellkite Igniter as our first non-artifact creature. I think it is very, very good. I like it. I think this is fine. Molten Steel Dragon is just okay. I recognize the fact that you can cast this for free because you pay the affinity removes the 4, and then you pay 4 life for a 4/4 flying dragon with Phyrexian fire breathing, as in you can pay a Phyrexian mana to give it +1 attack. Um, I don't know if I love this. Like, it looks cool, don't get me wrong. I really like the art. I really like the flavor of casting it through Chiss-Goria, but it's just okay. It's just a 4/4 flying dragon. You have a much better card that costs less generally outside of using Chiss-Goria, who is Chiss-Goria, right? So to have this card feels a little weird. I don't know. If you were cutting cards, this would be high on my list of just being kind of a weaker card than what it can do. Let's see. Our next one would be both Goldspan Dragon and Rapacious Dragon, I think are absolutely worth playing. Rapacious Dragon, I think some people might be picky on the fact that that's a lot of mana for 2 treasures. I like the fact that it gives you a dragon. I think it's fine. It's not great, but I think it's fine. And then going into the rest are either directly treasure related or artifact related. So I think that's all fine. Finally, let's look at the Planeswalkers. This is the last section I want to be a little critical on, especially with our boy Ugin over here, because Ugin is not an artifact even though he is colorless, which is a bit of a bummer. He does reduce the cost of all artifacts, so I think I'm going to give him a pass, but I'm going to say it's pretty close. Koth, Fire of Resistance seems just okay. I don't think it really fits here. I don't think this card is really where you want to be, and I think I would probably get rid of it. It just doesn't do enough, even with the +2 to constantly getting you lands. I think you could do a little better. Card Living Legacy, however, feels really good, makes sense. I like it here. Chandra, Torch of Defiance. It, like Koth, I don't think it belongs, but Chandra is better for sure, so I am more willing to let it go. The fact that you can get pseudo card advantage with her first +1 does by and far, improve her lot here. So, what cards am I going to suggest to replace some of these cards, or what cards do I think you should be playing? Now, there's a card I can't quite remember. What is that ability that we like to have that will use mana? I'm trying to think of it. It's from Kaladesh. You'll have to excuse me as I can't remember the card now. So let's go to sets. Let's go by block and write Kaladesh. Remember blocks? Those were fun. And we're going to put artifact, and we're going to put 3 mana. Either improvise or it is or inspiring. Improvise. It is improvise. Okay, I should have trusted my first judgment call. Improvise is really good because it allows you to cast spells using artifacts, much like Affinity. However, Inspiring Statuary, sorry, that's going to take me a few times to get. Inspiring Statuary works kind of opposite to Chiss-Goria in all of the perfect ways. This improves our non-artifact spells, Chiss-Goria improves our artifact spells, and they both give an ability that actually stacks with each other. So if you have this out, all of your artifacts that can tap count for 2 toward Chiss-Goria, which can be really, really useful when Chiss-Goria has like a ridiculous commander tax on it. This can start really pushing you forward. But also, this makes all of those cards that I was a little pickier on because they don't work with Chiss-Goria, all of the non-artifact creatures, it makes them considerably better. And I think for that point alone, this card is absolutely worth running. I think this is like the perfect card for this deck. If there was a companion card to this deck, I think it would be Inspiring Statuary. My God, this statuary. You see, now I'm tripping myself up. It would be this card. It would be this inspirational statue that stands out there. And so if you listen to nothing else I say, please play this card. This card is so, so good in your deck, and I think you would be very, very happy to use it. Now, I've got a series of other cards that I'm going to go through in no particular order, and so let's start them up. Fire Diamond. Fire Diamond here is a placeholder. It is representative of every 2-mana artifact you can get that taps for 1 mana. Obviously, red is better, but anyone will do. I see you're already running Fellwar Stone as an option, and this is one of those decks that I would absolutely tell you, even though it is 1 color, you should be playing Arcane Signet. So why am I suggesting this to you? Well, the main reason is that every single mana rock, well, outside of Soul Ring, which is the one highlighted, let's look at Mind Stone. Every single one of these mana rocks count for 2 for Chiss-Goria and Chiss-Goria's ability. So first we count the affinity, which is the card itself, and then it taps for an additional mana, which means we're now at 2 mana towards that card. That makes them incredibly valuable. Treasures cannot do this because you need to sacrifice the treasures to have the mana in order to cast Chiss-Goria. I don't think you can count it as an affinity card and then sacrifice it, even if it's already on the stack and already has a casting cost. I don't think that's how it works. I would be very surprised if that's how it works. So all of your mana rocks are very, very valuable. So if you can run any others, I think I would. It increases the number of artifacts. I think it's good ramp. You're really low on lands. You're at 31 lands. And 31 is great, assuming Chiss-Goria is always 3 mana. But because of that, you can afford to run a few more rocks to improve the mana of your deck. This also means you can throw away Skyclave Relic. I don't care that I guess 6 mana kicker is a lot easier to do with affinity, but I don't think you want this. This is a 3 mana mana rock is just bad almost all of the time, even with indestructible. I think just to keep yourself curving out, you're going to be much happier just with Fire Diamond or anything like that at 2 mana to keep going. All right, next is a collection of 3, with the worst one first, but we have Shimmermere, Liberator, and Skittering Cicada. Sorry. I've been listening to the bugs outside my window all day, and I forgot how to say cicada. All of these cards do kind of the same thing. Once again, Cicada is the worst. Cicada gives colorless cards flash, and the other 2, Liberator gives artifacts and colorless spells, so it's a bit of both, and Shimmermere gives just artifacts flash. And they each have flash 2, which is really, really good. What they do is they allow you to hold up a lot more mana than you think, and be able to work on your opponent's turns. Being able to hold up a mana rock to play at the end of your last opponent's turn is really, really good, because otherwise you got to play mana rocks fairly. And when you play a mana rock, everyone goes, oh, I guess they're not doing anything this turn, and they kind of reduce the anxiety level in the turn. Whereas if you hold up mana, especially when your deck has options like Bolt Bend and other instance spells, which you could play more of if you are playing Liberator, Shimmermere, and Skittering Cicada, these cards get a lot more intense. Also, I can't believe I just said only the instance. The cards, what they do is they make all your artifacts instant speed. And now I'm just realizing you are playing Shimmermere. I didn't see it. So that's fine. I think then the statement is, I think I looked for Liberator. And when I didn't see Liberator, I assumed you weren't playing any of them. So if you are playing Shimmermere, I think I would supplement it with Liberator and Skittering Cicada as soon as it goes down in price. $12 is not the price this card will be at forever. It is honestly just an okay card, so I don't expect it to stay at this price. But even then, Liberator will be a good addition. Next, you're in red. You should be playing Lightning Bolt. I will fight everyone on this forever. Lightning Bolt is a fantastic card in Commander, and you have the room for it. You can't play Swords to Plowshares, but you can play Lightning Bolt. So I highly, highly recommend playing it. Also, for what it's worth, and I'll leave this up to you, you can play Blood Moon. You are in mono red. Play Blood Moon. Make your opponents hate you. They absolutely deserve it. They're coming in with their fancy multicolor decks, and you're showing up to be nice and fair in mono red. It's time to be a little less fair. Blood Moon. I'll leave that one up to you, but I do really like you. All right, a few others here. I have Duretti. I think Duretti is just fine here. You can replace one of your two planeswalkers that I suggest, like Koth can be replaced by Duretti. Just a little more on theme. Gives you something to do with the artifacts that are just stalling it. Like Phyrexian Triniform is what, 9 or 11 mana? I always forget. It is 9 mana. So Triniform or Triplicate Titan are 9 mana. There's going to be a point you don't want them in your hand. Discard them, draw new cards. Also, Trash for Treasure is a very good card in your deck. Might as well use it as a -2. Duretti is a great inclusion here. After that, another artifact character who has changed a little bit is Slowbad Iron Goblin. They're going to allow you to sacrifice your artifacts to cast other artifacts, which enables you to cast those Phyrexian Triniforms when you don't have the means to get Chiss-Goria in play or another card to reduce mana cost. It's not perfect. I'm going to say it's just okay, but in the times that it's good, it's going to be really, really good. Imagine a situation where you cheat out into play Triplicate Titan, and then when someone points removal at it, or just in general, you just sacrifice it to Slowbad, get 9 red mana, get your 3 pieces of your Titan, and then use that 9 red mana to play Skitterbeam Battalion or something like that, right? That can be a really, really explosive turn. You could even just find other lower mana cards that you no longer want and aren't as strong. Like a Burnished Heart late game isn't really, really good because it's very mana intensive to make it work, whereas Slowbad can turn that into 3 red mana toward another artifact. Pretty cute. I'm kind of medium on it, but I think it's interesting. I have here fresh, new from March of the Machine Aftermath is Reckless Handling. Reckless Handling is like Gamble for 2 mana that only gets artifacts. I'm not sure if I like this, but I think it's just fine. I'll leave it to you to decide whether this is good enough. I think it's just fine. I think you can use this to put the right artifact into your hand and hopefully not discard it, or you can use it and hope to discard it and use something like Duretti to bring it back. Or you could just be playing Trash for Treasure itself, which is just a solid reanimation spell in mono red artifacts. Speaking of reanimation spells in our colors, Scrap Mastery is a card I didn't quite know existed, and I am kind of losing my mind about it. It is so, so cool. It is Living Death for artifacts. If you aren't aware what Living Death does, it basically swaps all the creatures in play with the creatures in the graveyard, and Scrap Mastery does the same for artifacts. You lose all your artifacts in play, and you put all the artifacts from your graveyard onto the battlefield. Now, you play a lot of artifacts. This card can be almost used against you at times. However, you know what's the most vulnerable type of card in Commander? I'm pretty sure it's artifacts, because everyone knows everyone is bringing quite a few of them, and artifact hate is cheap and easy to pack, and therefore there are going to be situations where you lose all of your artifacts. In fact, a regular board wipe will destroy all your artifact creatures, which will also put them in the graveyard. Scrap Mastery loves this. Scrap Mastery is perfectly fine with a bunch of your cards going to the graveyard, whether by destruction or by discard, and will bring them all back. I think this is a fun inclusion and definitely worth the 5 mana that you could play instead of there and back and again. I would definitely play this in its stead. Finally, I have 2 artifacts that are worth considering. Endless Atlas just got back on my radar because it just got reprinted. I think that's fine here. I think 2 mana draw a card is just serviceable here, as long as you have 3 mountains, which you should have with, I think it was 28 mountains in your deck. This is fine. Not amazing, but it's fine. It's just card draw every turn, and I think you could really use this. But the other artifact I really want to bring to your attention is Gilded Pinions. And I think I could be wrong. There might be a few other cards like this, but this kind of works in the same way that the Mana Rocks do, where it's putting two artifacts on the battlefield, and one of them is a treasure. And I think the versatility of that is just really, really high because just by itself, this is affinity two, like two affinity pieces. And then when you need it, you can just sacrifice the treasure in order to gain mana or a number of your other cards that interact with treasures. So it's not crazy good, but it is something. It's also the type of card that benefits from being, sacrificed and then brought back because you get a treasure token every time. Once again, not amazing, but just kind of interesting. The flying obviously has very little interest to you because your commander already has flying, but in a pinch, it does give one of your golems flying. I think that's pretty good. In the end, it is something to consider. And like I said, I think there's a few other cards like this. Any card that comes in with several artifacts at a time, I think in mono red, I think would be worth considering just because of the sheer amount of affinity it can bring to you. All right. With that in mind, I am going to see. Yeah, perfect. With that in mind, I think that is where I'm going to close up this deck assist. I really like Chiss-Goria. I think this deck works really, really well and is really fun. And though you said like you're on a budget, I think this deck is perfectly fine on any sort of budget. So I'm going to look through. I think Blood Moon is the most expensive card I've suggested, and even then, that was a very soft card to suggest. That's up to you. But for everything else, I think this deck will exist very, very well on a very good budget. Coming to mind right now, what is that legendary? Huh? What are they called? Juggernaut, right? Don't we have? Yeah, Graz. Should Graz be in here? Maybe. I think Graz could be very, very strong here. It does weaken your commander, which is a little funny, but for every other creature in your deck, that's not true. With all your Titans, maybe this isn't particularly good. Okay, I changed my mind. Probably you shouldn't play this unless you're playing it with this art, and then you should absolutely play it because this art is so cool. Anyways, going back to Chiss-Goria, I think Chiss-Goria is a great deck. I think there's a lot you can do within your budget, and I think just a few of the suggestions I've brought up hopefully will make the deck a little more smooth. It's always the case that there's just, you know, a few cards here and there that can be improved or changed. However, once again, I'm going to be very specific and say you should absolutely play Inspiring Statuary. My goodness, this card. Play this card. All right. I hope this deck assist was helpful to you. If you have any other decks you'd like me to take a look at, or another draft of this deck, there is a form in the video description below that you can fill out and send my way. If you would like your deck list to be put at the front of the line, there is a form down there that you can fill out as well for that pleasure. And it would be supporting the channel, which would be very, very helpful. Speaking of supporting the channel, if you could like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm thing, I'd be ever so grateful. The channel is still growing, and all help is always appreciated. All right, don't forget to put this card in, and I wish you luck with Chiss-Goria. What a cool dragon, honestly.